Yes, thank you. My presentation will be completely different from all the previous ones because I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. The German elections produced a number of remarkable results. For the first time in 5 decades, both major parties were able to increase their share of votes, albeit to a very different extent. The Christian Democrats barely missed an absolute majority in parliament, and the Social Democrats gained 31% of the mandates. The results demonstrates that the often discussed decline of the German catch-all parties is not an inevitable process, which is primarily determined by long-term economic and social changes. The decline can be stopped and even reversed by the parties themselves if they are able to influence the short-term factors shaping the electoral behavior by offering optimal candidates and policies to the electorate. However, given the transition to a more flexible electoral behavior among Germans, the opposite can happen too. That is, a party can lose a substantial share of its voter support. This is what the liberals had to learn the hard way when they failed to remain in parliament. With the Greens and the Left Party alike, they had to put up with a decline in votes for the first time, and overall, the German party system has now returned to a system of two-party dominance after it had changed into a pluralistic system in 2009. The structural changes of the party system initiated by the elections have also created strong incentives to reduce the dividing lines between the parties with respect to coalitions. The parties have already begun to react to this development by considering new coalition partners. For instance, the recent party convention of the Social Democrats has decided to be principally open to a coalition with the Left Party in the future. For the topic of this conference, one additional result of the election is of great importance. For the first time in the history of the Republic, a party which had only been founded shortly before the elections was almost elected into the German Bundestag. As all of you know, I'm talking about the Alternative for Germany, which was founded in February and got 4.7% of the vote only 7 months later. With the AfD, a party heavily criticizing Germany's policy of rescuing the euro showed up. In the following, I will discuss the question whether the AfD established a new party political cleavage regarding European integration in Germany, or whether the party's positions merge into the existing party political cleavage structure of the German party system. Researchers of political parties have been discussing for decades now how many and what kinds of basic cleavages are shaping the national party competition. The starting point for these debates was provided by both the spatial modeling of party competition in Anthony Downs' Economic Theory of Democracy and the theory of social cleavages by Seymour Martin Lipset and Stein Rokan. For Downs, the party competition was shaped by a single conflict line, the left-right conflict, which was manifested in the conflict over state intervention in the economy. Lipset and Rokan, however, identified 4 social cleavages which were politicized, thereby shaping the development of the Western European party systems in the mid-19th century. And these cleavages are the class cleavage, the urban-rural cleavage, the church-state cleavage, and the center-periphery cleavage. And among those researchers of political parties advocating the cleavage theory, the discussions still center on the questions of how social cleavages are transformed into party political cleavages and which central cleavages the party competition is structured by. For some time now, the German research community on political parties has been dominated by the notion that the German party competition is structured by 2 central party political cleavages, both being primarily value conflicts. These are the welfare state cleavage between social justice and market liberalism in the socio-economic sphere, and the cleavage between progressive libertarian and conservative authoritarian value positions in the socio-cultural sphere. Against this background, European integration can be embedded quite differently in the conflict structure of national party competition. To begin with, one can follow Downs' approach and interpret the different positions on European integration as a specific manifestation of the left-right conflict. And this conceptualization, the proponents of regulating the market in the interest of the welfare state would stand vis-à-vis the advocates of a free market on the European level. But if one interprets, as I do, the party competition in the tradition of Lipset and Okan as a multidimensional conflict structure, one has, in principle, two options. On the one hand, the European integration conflict can be regarded as a new and separate party political cleavage. And even this can be done in different ways. First, one could conceptualize it as a new kind of center-periphery cleavage, where advocates of the supranational integration of nation states face the proponents of national autonomy. Second, if one focuses on the socio-cultural sphere, one might interpret it as a question of national identity. And third, one could conceive it as the manifestation of a more general globalization conflict with both socio-economic and socio-cultural dimensions, where the winners and losers of globalization are facing each other. On the other hand, there is the second option, namely to integrate the various party positions on those questions related to European integration into the already existing party political cleavage structure of the respective countries. This would mean to conceptualize European integration as an issue which specifies existing cleavages. One has to stress here that not any political conflict between parties can be regarded as a party political cleavage. In order to be classified as a cleavage, the conflict, in my view, first has to arise between diametrically opposed objectives and should not merely be about differences on how to achieve an aim which is in principle shared by everyone. Second, the conflict has to have a relevant representation in party politics. I propose to conceptualize the European integration conflict as a new type of center-periphery conflict about the issue of national autonomy opposed to supranational integration. Doing this, one can decide the question of whether the European integration marks the relevant cleavage on the basis of two criteria. On the one hand, the conflict must be represented by parties which are not only quarreling about how European integration should be organized, but which are either for or against the inclusion of their country into the supranational European project. This means that there has to be at least one party which propagates the withdrawal from the EU. On the other hand, the conflict has to be represented by relevant parties in the party system. This can be operationalized by their representation in parliament. Both conditions are filled, for instance, in France and the Netherlands with the National Front and the Party for Freedom. If these conditions do not apply, there can, of course, still evolve political conflicts about issues related to the European integration process, like the Euro crisis. But in this case, however, the conflicts are embedded in the existing party political cleavage structure. That is, they represent a specification of the already present cleavages. In order to clarify what this integration precisely looks like, one first has to identify the party political conflict structure. Second, it is necessary to analyze which cleavage or cleavages the respective European integration issues are assigned to in the national party competition. The latter can be done by examining how the parties frame the topic during their election campaign for the general election. In the German National Party competition, the issue of European integration did not play a decisive role before the Euro crisis. For the electorate, too, the EU topic was of limited relevance. Regarding the central questions of European integration, there was a broad consensus among the parties represented in the parliament. In principle, this also included the left party, albeit with considerable reservations. EU skeptical parties like the right-wing parties Alliance for Free Citizens and the Initiative for the D-Mark, which campaigned against the monetary union during the 1990s, were not able to achieve any successes in the elections back then. Even the elections for the European Parliament have been dominated by the national arena. But the Euro crisis has politicized the issue of European integration in Germany somewhat and has weakened the inter-party principles of consensus which were valid for many decades. These changes lead to the establishment of a new and really separate European integration cleavage within the party system during the general elections in 2013. I think the question can only be answered with a clear no. For one, the AfD is not yet represented in the parliament. Furthermore, the AfD is no anti-EU party. It is not even a consistent anti-Euro party. The AfD does not want Germany to regain its full national autonomy by withdrawing from any supranational European integration. Its aim is a European community with a single European market, but with the legislative competences and especially the unreserved budgetary power handed back to the national parliaments. Regarding the euro, the election manifesto calls for a controlled dissolution of the eurozone, as well as the reintroduction of national currencies or the creation of smaller and more stable areas with a common currency. The AfD thus allows for a number of alternatives on how to act and does neither explicitly argue for the abolition of the euro as a common currency of several EU member states, nor for Germany's withdrawal from a smaller currency union, for instance, between northern European states. The AfD's current criticism of the euro, as well as the strategy to rescue the currency, is purely based on socio-economic reasoning and is embedded in a clear free market position within the welfare state conflict. This position is also revealed in other policy fields like the issue of taxation. The other parties too framed the euro crisis, if it was addressed at all during the election campaign, in the context of their general position within the welfare state conflict. Hence, one can definitely state that the euro crisis has been integrated into the existing cleavage structure of the German party system, namely the welfare state cleavage. Let me make a final remark on the prospects of the AfD to establish itself within the German party system. Among some politicians and parts of the media, as well as my colleague Creasy, the AfD is regarded as a right-wing populist party. I think, however, the classification of the party up to now is very difficult. The AfD certainly is a populist party, but it is impossible to infer conclusively from the rather short party manifesto, which is only 4 pages, that it is a right-wing populist party. With regard to the social-cultural cleavage, the party rather adopts a national conservative position, as can be seen, for instance, on the issues of immigration and family policies. The AfD does, however, attract disappointed activists from a number of smaller right-wing populist parties. And these people think that they can enhance the opportunities of achieving their aims within the new party. This is why the AfD is currently rattled by an internal conflict and debate about the future ideological positioning of the party. And the outcome of this debate will decide about the future of the party itself. If the AfD succeeds in presenting itself as a national conservative and free market party, and in clearly dissociating itself from right-wing populism, it will be able to rival the liberals on the socio-economic cleavage and the Christian Democrats on the social-cultural cleavage. And this would secure the AfD a place within a German party system. Thank you.